Oh man, the death of Bedlam and rivalries. Yeah, we gotta dive into that bad boy. We'll talk about that coming up in about 10 seconds. Welcome to Unfair Sports. I am your host, Jay. Thank you all for tuning here on the channel. Please, while you're here, hit that like and subscribe button and show some love. That tells YouTube that I'm doing something right. And by subscribing, you get way more of this content. I've got a special guest with me today on this video, my main man, Ty Hayes with Around the Table Sports. Ty, let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Jay. Always a ton of fun getting to talk to you. Y'all can find me at Around the Table Sports on YouTube. Constant college football content, whether that's game analysis, kind of talking about film, or recruiting. I'm talking about college football all the time. Love to have you all over there. It's always a good time. And you can see Jay quite frequently over there as well. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we have a blast over there, and we definitely talk a bunch of college football. So we've got some topics to jump into, and we'll dive in. All right, Ty. This one pains me. Okay, I'm lying. It really doesn't. So, with all of the conference realignments going on, we're hearing a lot of conversations around rivalries that may start to dwindle. Now, this goes into a much bigger conversation than what we're going to have right now, but I'm very much intrigued at your thoughts. So, there's been a couple of conferences going, press conferences recently between Oklahoma State and Oklahoma talking about the Bedlam rivalry and if that game's going to continue. Oklahoma's already stated, we're down to do it. We just got to wait for Oklahoma State to be available to do it. Oklahoma State's like, well, you're leaving to the SEC, so obviously you don't want to do it, which I think is funny. And it feels like, of course, Oklahoma is willing to do it. I think Oklahoma State would be willing to do it if they had the space. I went and looked at their schedule, their future schedule, and Oklahoma State's basically booked all the way out to about 2031. So that might be the soonest. I think there's like one gap at 2025 that they could pick up if Oklahoma State wants to. But with all the new conference changes, they'll add 4 teams to the Big 12 once OU and Texas leaves. They're going to have to division that up. And then when OU and Texas heads to the SEC, that's 16 teams that they're going to figure out scheduling for. So, Ty, I'm curious your thoughts. Twofold. One, does it bother you that we're going to be losing some rivalries when it comes to the new conference realignments that are definitely coming down the chain over the next 4 years?
Yeah, I think it should bother everybody. And look, let me preface it by saying this. Change is inevitable, right? Change is the one consistency in life, right? We know that that's going to happen no matter what. The reason why it should bother you is because what makes college football great? You're talking about a tradition-rich sport that breeds this level of tribalism amongst the fan bases that you really just don't see from pro sports, right? And that's why I'm not simply relegating it to college football. It's there in college basketball. It just seems that football is the conduit of fans' passion in the United States of America, so it gets a disproportionate amount of views. So yes, at some level, I do think that having these rivalries is great for college football. And I talked about this, and I was both surprised and unsurprised by the feedback I got. And to people's credit, I understand that this is using the word rivalry very loosely. And I grant people that because people pointed me to the record overall and said, Ty, there's no way this is a rivalry. No. And I hear you. You're not wrong. But rivalry is deeper than that. Rivalry, I want you to think back to when you're growing up. If you have a younger sibling, you might beat them in everything you play them in, whether it's basketball, checkers, chess. But that doesn't diminish from the fact that there's a personal thing there that makes it different than when you play anybody else. There's some level of this personal attachment. And whether we look around college football, you look at some of the great rivalries that are really just state rivalry games. Clemson, South Carolina, the Iron Bowl, Auburn, Alabama, the Egg Bowl, Washington and the Washington State. So many great games are played along these state rivalries. So I understand Oklahoma has dominated this. And I get it, Oklahoma fans. A lot of people say they aren't going to miss this. But at some level, like, this meant something to the state of Oklahoma, whether people realized like how much or not. It was a big deal. And even someone who's not definite fan of either program. I loved the game. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world because a new rivalry will form, but it still sucks.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I was listening to the Shutdown Full cast earlier today, and Holly Anderson made a fantastic point about this. It's like, it's more so the in-state rivalries are bigger because it's your neighbor. It's the beef with your coworker. You've got a close proximity of hate that you can truly feel it fester among each other. And I think it was Jason Kirk had mentioned this as well, either him or Ryan Nanny. They said that the best part about it is that even though you know the outcome, 9 times out of 10, there's that one time that a random situation happens and it derails the entire season for one side and elevates the season for the other. And I get that. That piece, to me, I understand. The only thing about this is that if Oklahoma State was serious and understood the reason why Oklahoma left, I think it's more of a beef of, you're leaving the conference and you didn't even try to bring me with you. We don't want to deal with you anymore. It's kind of like the way Texas is treating Texas A&M, how they have refused to ever play them again because A&M left the Big 12. Honestly, if A&M would have stayed in they probably would have had a better chance of winning a conference championship. But I digress on that situation. They chased the money for real in that one. This situation was a combination of money and access. Now that the conference, the college football playoffs have expanded to 12, I'm honestly questioning the move to the SEC now. I don't see a reason to do it because there's now 2 teams from that conference is going to make it, but it's only going to be 2. And they're going to make sure that it's only 2 from the SEC making it. So it's going to be the champion and the runner-up, unless the runner-up is on one side of one division that did not have a very great record. If it's like, this perfect example, if they make it East-West, and we'll just use this as example, Oklahoma loses to Bama during the season. Bama plays in the conference championship, but Oklahoma only has 1 loss, and they're right behind. It was a close loss to Alabama. Bama wins the conference championship. There's a chance that Oklahoma could end up being an at-large, specifically because their record showed it, and they beat up everybody else that was probably ranked when they played them. But besides that, only 2 teams going to make it. They're not going to allow 3 teams out of the SEC because...
Do you not think?
I don't think so. I'd say it because of this. If they're going to take the 6, and then this is the speculation of how they're going to do it. If the speculation is right and they do the top 6 conference champions that are ranked, to me, that just kind of hurts what anybody else in the SEC is going to be able to do, because I don't see 3 teams in the SEC being ranked that high. You see what I'm saying? Like, I think that's going to be where the struggle will be. Because I think the SEC's problem is they eat themselves alive. They eat each other up. So a 3-loss SEC team's not going to make the playoff.
But here's the thing, man. And here's what I look at it. We have 2 teams in the SEC make the playoff in a 4-team format. And so, yeah, you'd still have your 6 conference champions make it. So obviously one of them is going to be an SEC team. So you're already granted 1 in through the 6. Well, now you have 6 more opportunities. So just statistically speaking, like if you could get 2 in through 4 and you're already guaranteed 1 in every year, I think you could see 3 SEC teams in, because there's so many times when we look at this and the SEC has 3 teams in the top 10, right? I do think we could see multiple SEC teams entering into the playoffs. And that's why when they did the playoff expansion, and it's so interesting. You brought up a point that I actually wrote down as you were bringing it up, because it's interesting to me that the big reason and push for the college football playoff expansion is, oh, well, what if there's that one time that the underdog pulls off the upset? But in the Bedlam rivalry, people don't consider it a rivalry because it's so one-sided. But just to your point, well, what if the one time someone pulls it off? Isn't that worth it in the one time? It's just interesting to me that we have a different kind of standard of acceptance for like this rivalry, but then the playoffs, like we live for that upset in the playoffs, but we're not interested in that upset in the state rivalry. You get what I'm like? I don't know. That's kind of an interesting juxtaposition to me.
It is.
Draw that line there.
No, and you're right. And I totally agree with you there. It's the... And so this is why my take was on that it's going to be really hard for 3 SEC teams. Now, there's a chance. I think the one chance for this to happen is that a Alabama or a Georgia makes it to the conference championship, and loses to the other side that has a team that has, it's like 9-2.
Well,
But,
I think that's
or
very
10-2.
realistic because Georgia's on the other side. So
For now, until we see what this new alignment's going to look like, they're going to have to make some sort of adjustments, right? Or
they're
they're going to
not
go to
going
a
to put
pod
Bama
system.
and Georgia in the same pod because you could, don't get me wrong, but that, I mean, that would be automatically the worst pod to be in college football, in my opinion. Because, I mean, you think about it. What if the pod was Texas, Oklahoma, Bama, Georgia? That is not where you want to be if you're in the SEC. I don't care if you're Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, or Georgia. You look at that and say, dang, we drew the short end of this stick.
No, you want to know what that is? That is the, let me give you the name of it, the Big Ten East. That's exactly what that would be.
Yeah, no.
Michigan,
for sure.
Ohio State, Michigan State, and Penn State right there. But that's what it feels like it could end up being. Or I mean, if you really think about it, Missouri got punished going to the SEC. They did not do them any favors besides money. They sent them to the East instead of them being on the West.
But in your point, the SEC West has been like that for a while. I mean, you look at the past 10 years. Yeah, it's been 10 years in college football from 2013 till now, right? There's been 3 teams in the SEC West alone to win a national championship.
Yep.
3 teams in a 10-year span. So the SEC West in and of itself has been a gauntlet. That's why I say, like, I don't see any scenario where they put like Bama and Georgia in the same pod in the SEC. It would make for great regular season, but I think that the push is for the postseason. So they want to ensure that these major brands can get their playing time in the postseason. Because to me, what the playoff signifies is we're not going to put as much emphasis on the regular season as the postseason. Not saying the regular season won't matter, but just that the postseason we're going to add much more value to. At that point, I think it's in their interest to try and ensure that, not to pad it to where these big brands make it, but to make it to where if they do make it, we'll get that game when it matters.
No, that's a very interesting point. I think that this is my only disagreement when it comes to it. Now, this conversation has gotten very interesting. Is I feel like the expansion makes the regular season more important, while also giving us excitement in the playoffs. And this is why. If they're taking the top 6 ranked conference champions, if a 8-5 SEC East team magically goes past Georgia, gets into the conference championship, and they beat a Alabama or a LSU on one of their high years to win the conference championship, if they're the 7th ranked SEC team, 7th ranked conference champion, they're not going to make the playoffs. There's a chance that they may end up being the at-large, but then that means that the SEC would have 2 at-large teams because they would have a highly ranked team at the top. This is why I said the emphasis is on the conference, is on the season, because you need to win a conference championship to guarantee you're going to be there. That's the easy way in. The excitement about the playoff comes in is because it's just like March Madness. And I talked about this on a video in the past, that we don't, when it comes to March Madness and college basketball, the exciting thing about that is the first weekend, the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Why? Because anything can happen that weekend. Random teams win. It's exciting. It's upsets. It's great. But once you get past that, 6 teams ranked 9 or lower has ever made it to the Final Four. They have no chance. They weren't going to make it anyway. But we love the initial excitement. And that's what the conference championship, as well as the first rounds of the playoffs, gives us. It gives us there's a chance this 12 seed's going to upset a 5 seed or a 6 seed, because that's actually the only place where we're going to see real upsets. 1 through 4, it's the same as 1 through 4 has always been. This just gives us entertainment value in the playoff, because none of those teams from 5 to 12, you'll probably get one every 5 years that one of those teams will actually make it deep into the playoffs. That's always been my thought. Those top 4, once they get solidified, your Ohio State, your Alabama, maybe a Oklahoma if they get lucky. Now that they're in the SEC, may not be, just depends. But one of those top 4 teams, once they get in there and they play that next game, it's going to beat up on the next team, because that's just kind of how we've always seen college football. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think, and I've thought a lot about the March Madness example because that's all that's the one people go with instantly
Mhm.
when you're talking about the playoff expansion. I think that when we look at this though, like and look at rates of underdogs winning, college football is just so drastically different than college
It is.
basketball, right? Whenever you're talking about 11 people as compared to 5, like the margins are just so different. Now, uh, here's where I will disagree.
Mhm.
Whenever you're talking about like the 6 conference champions, it makes it more important to win a conference championship. You're right, because that does guarantee you. Here's where I disagree with you, though. Right now, there's no parameters in the college football structure to make it to the playoffs by winning a conference championship, right? Like you don't
Mhm.
have to win a conference championship to make it. It's more likely you do, but it's not a requirement. Well, we already have 4 teams that can make it, and there's no such parameters to win a conference championship. So now we're going to make it to where 6 teams get in by winning a conference championship, but now we've increased the amount of teams that can make it with no parameters. To me, that's not adding value to the regular season. That's taking away
Mm.
value to the regular season. You already have a system that gives you no parameters on winning a conference championship. Now you're saying I'm going to put 6 teams in there and 6 teams that there are no parameters we're going to add in. If we're talking about value being added, I don't see how it gets added whenever we've increased the pool of teams where there are no parameters to be entered into this playoff system.
And that's a fair point. That's very fair. I like that thought. I guess for me, it's the easier road there is winning a conference championship. And
Yeah.
traditionally, your teams that are on the outside looking in, like we've seen conference champions be on the outside looking in,
True.
even with a better record than a team that makes it into the playoff. Now, I mean, of course, there's usually the Notre Dames of the world that traditionally get in there, or even the teams that we've seen that have played and been undefeated. I've always been in the position of this: if a team can go undefeated in their conference against talent equal to them traditionally, if they can go undefeated in the conference, which is really hard because not very many teams have ever done it. Heck, Alabama's won 2 national championships undefeated out of all of them that they've won in the last 20 years. That tells you how hard it is, right? If they can make it through that gauntlet and do that, they deserve to get boat raced by Alabama. They deserve to get boat raced by Georgia. They deserve the opportunity to get blown out, because this is why I say the excitement of, even though we've opened it up to more people can get in, that excitement is a little bit more worth it with a bigger pool. We get blowouts in the top 4 every year. There's usually
Yeah.
one or two teams
Yeah.
that's worth watching, period. The rest of the games are always blowouts. So it's not honestly fun watching those games, because by the time we get about 5 minutes into the first quarter, we already know who's going to win the game. In the first round. Championship game, we've gotten some much better performances because it's the 2 teams that's supposed to be there. But before that, they're blowouts. We've watched Alabama get blown out. We've watched Georgia get blown out. We've watched Oklahoma numerous times get blown out. We've watched Clemson get blown out. Washington, Oregon.
Bama
We've
get
seen
blown out,
everybody.
too. Yeah.
Everybody gets it. It's just that it's not that fun. But I think that those other games beforehand, I think that because people have to fight to get in, because it's still 12 spots. And there's over 100 and something schools. It's going to be your traditional powers. You'll see more Michigans. You honestly might see more Texas in some years when they have the moments where they think they're back and they're not. And this is my only argument for how having more access is kind of better. Those bowl games outside of the college football playoff are usually really good. UCF play Auburn to the wire when they had their non-undefeated season that year. That was a fun game to watch. We get a lot more of those in games that have nothing to do with the college football playoff than we do actually with the college football playoff. So I think that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at, that position of having a little bit more access will give us just funner games to watch. I guess it just makes it games that you want to actually see. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're going to tune in. You're going to watch to the wire. Instead of, they're getting blown out. Let's wait for the national championship game. I'm kind of tired of it.
And I think one thing people need to understand about me, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a college football purist. And when I say that
I'm
is like, I'm the type of guy that, for instance, Oklahoma beats Kent State. I make a video talking about like, hey, this is a good win, and here's the reasons why. This is what we learned. USC beats up on Rice. I make a video saying, hey, this is a good win. Here's why. the reason why I do that is because I'm very well of the belief that you can learn something from every single opponent you play. It's just about finding the lessons imparted in the game. Some lessons are bigger than others. Granted, the level of opponent you play will give you a bigger lesson than a smaller opponent, but a lesson is there nonetheless. So that's kind of how I view college football. And so I realize that my line of thinking is probably not the correct one. And I certainly don't hold it out to be the correct one. I just think what makes college football special is this ultimate summation of meritocracy, right? And
it's
that
fair.
is now going to change. Now, whether it's good or not, I've never gone as far as to say I think this is bad for college football.
Yeah.
I've said I don't necessarily like 12 teams. I'm fine with an expansion, maybe less, but I'm not going to go as far as to say it's bad for college football because I don't know if it is or not, right? There are people that say the transfer portal is bad for college football. I think that with some structure around it, there's an argument to be made that it's good for college. So it's kind of two sides to every coin, right? And we have to wait and see what it looks like once it gets here before we can actually make that assumption on whether it's good or bad.
And I'm there with you with that on the purist piece when it comes to the rivalries. Like, I enjoy that hate that's in between certain schools and everything. And like I said, with Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, if they want to do it, they can figure that bad boy out. It ain't that hard. Iowa and Iowa State does it every year, and they've done it every year for years, and they've been in different conferences forever. You know what I'm saying? Florida State and Florida State. I'm sorry, I'm getting a brain moment. But Georgia and Georgia Tech do it. They play each other on a regular basis. Schools figure that bad boy out. When Florida and Florida State, my apologies. That's who I was thinking. They play each other, and they're in different conferences. So it gets figured out when people want to. You just got to make a cautious effort to do it. And I guess for like Oklahoma and Texas, they've got to figure out what the heck's going to look like when the new conference alignment looks like. But when they get in there and they have to move and shift teams around because it's 16, just like the Big Ten with 16 teams that always, well, there'll be 18 teams coming up, right? Good
I have no
they've got
idea
a lot of teams in the Big Ten.
Well,
why do they
we
just
don't
get
even
the
know
big conference?
Yeah, we don't even know that the expansion's done there. I mean, there's
Exactly.
soft reports all the time, depending on where you get your college football news from. Oregon is still in talks. I mean, there's articles about it. Whether or not it's happening or not, I'm certainly not here saying it is. But just saying there's constant rumors that this team is looking to go, this team. One thing, I don't think we can disqualify any rumors at this point, given what we've seen.
Yeah, especially the way that they've come out. Like, it's just all of a sudden you hear, boom, they've signed this deal. Like, wait, what? Wait, no one even reported that this was even a conversation. I did see that if Notre Dame goes there, there's supposedly $1 billion clause in their TV deal that's going to be added automatically. And it's like, Jesus, they're going to go to $8 billion? How?
Hey, whatever you say about Notre Dame, I got to give it to whoever's in their decision-making capabilities, because that guy's job, that woman's job, whoever it is, has been to make that university money, and they have made that university a killing. So they have done a beautiful job.
Yep, masterful. They're legends at the bank, and that should be a master class that's taught to every single conference, let alone just school. So, Todd, thank you so much, my man, for that. We appreciate it. Let the people know where they can find you again.
Yeah, Jay, thank you for having me on. It's always a ton of fun to talk college football, and as y'all can see, I can talk college football for hours. It's really a problem, but if you want to enable my problem, head over to Around the Table Sports. I do constant college football content, previews, post-game analysis, you name it. We talk about it. We'll be going live tomorrow, 5:30, talking about the games this weekend, so I'd love to see you there.
Yeah, pull up. It's going to be a great time. I'm definitely going to be tuned in, and we'll chop it up in a few days. Peace.
Yes, sir.